Hi everyone, it's me, Darlene. I am here with an update as to what has been going on with Joe lately. And I have decided that I might make this 2 videos or more, because right now he's in the ICU at the hospital. Well, I hope at the hospital. And, you know, we're still just in the midst of things. So I will have some more updates, but there's a lot that I could tell you right now. But he was also in the hospital just a night in the ER about a week ago. I didn't bother to talk about that, but now I will fill you in on that too. And then what's going on now. And there's some things that I want to include. It would end up being a very long video, which is fine, but I don't feel like doing all that editing tonight. It is 5:30. I went to see him today, stayed with him for quite a while, and then I went to a car lot and looked at a couple of cars because I was right there in South Haven, so I thought I really need to take advantage of doing that. And it wasn't really hot. It was sprinkling, actually, gray, so no sun. So I will continue doing that. I need to get a car. I want to get that over with, just to knock that off my stress list, because I have a lot of other things on that list. And then I came home. I hadn't eaten all day, and so I ate. And now it's 5:30, and I'm here. I'm going to record and talk to you guys for a little bit, do the editing and all that. I was going to go see him again tonight, but I decided, and told him before I left the hospital, I said, I don't think I can come back tonight. He's like, no, that's fine. And I told him I'll come and see you tomorrow, because I knew I had stuff to do, and I don't want to be driving his old clunky SUV there at night in the rain with people still wanting to go fast and me wanting to do 30 on a 70-mile-per-hour highway with a SUV that I feel could fall apart any moment. We're looking for something else for him too. I had to edit what I recorded so far because my brain is a little tired. I lost track of what I was saying. It's going to be a video like that. That's why I didn't want it to be too long. Let's start with a week ago. A week ago, his sugar was low. Yeah, and it was weird because it wasn't low when I checked him before he went to bed. It wasn't high either. It was just about okay, but he wanted to still take his insulin. And I said, are you sure you need to take your insulin? He takes 2 different ones at night, a fast acting and a slow acting. And he's like, no, I'm supposed to be taking it. And I said, okay, because he knows best, right? But I'm starting to learn when to say, no, you really shouldn't. But again, I trust that he knows what he's doing. And so I cranked up his insulin, and he gave himself his shot, and we go to bed. Now, I'm up, awake, I should say, and he's asleep, and I can hear him. Everything's good, and I'll often touch him just to see if he is sweaty, because that's a sign of low sugar. And I had completely, forgot about the fact that he had taken some insulin. So around, I can't remember if it was 12:30 or 1:30. I think it was like 12:30. He starts making like a gurgling sound, just like, just like inside. And I got so scared. I thought he was either having some kind of a seizure or a convulsion, or he was dying. I mean, because some people, when they die, they have that raspy, I don't know, there's a name for it, but it's, they're taking their last breaths. And so I immediately touch him, and he is drenched, and he's naked, but he's drenched. The sheets are drenched as though somebody poured water on the bed. And I was like, oh my God. So I got up so fast, and I called 911, and I'm checking his sugar at the same time, and it was 22, which is very low. And So I get the woman on the phone, and I could not get him to open his eyes. I knew I was not going to be able to give him anything in his mouth, sugar. I wouldn't have been able to get him to sip out of a straw. And with all that gurgling he was doing, I was afraid he would choke. And, so I wasn't even attempting that. I knew he needed one of those D50 shots or whatever. It's, just gives them, it's like pure sugar in I don't know if it's a shot or an IV. I don't remember. Oh, it's just very scary, and I was waiting and waiting, and she stayed with me on the phone, the 911 person, because she could tell I was very, very worried, and I kept trying to get him to open his eyes at some point in that, and it was probably a good 10 minutes. I mean, it seemed longer, but I don't know, the ambulance usually gets here quicker than that. So I got him to open his eyes. I just kept saying, Joe, Joe, Joe. And at some point he opened his eyes before the ambulance came. And then when the ambulance, I said, they're outside. And I said, I got to go show them which apartment. So we hung up. And I have to carry Rocket the whole time because Rocket's going to bark a lot. And he knows when these people come that they're going to be all over his daddy, and that worries him. So they come in, I explain, I showed them, what I saw on the meter, and they used their meter, and at that point it said low. So he says, this means he has dropped to below 20. If it just says low, and I didn't know, I've never seen it say low, but I knew that was very low. If it says low, then it's below 20. I learned that just last week. If it's high, if it says HI for high, it is, and that's what it is, HI. They don't do HIGH, but HI for high. So I think some meters can vary, but Joe's meters means it's over 600. So they took him right away, and they said, we're going to a hospital in South Haven. I said, all right, I'll go there. And but they gave him that D50. Hang on, let me make sure I'm saying that right. A D50 shot, or also known as 50% dextrose injection, is an emergency treatment for severe hypoglycemia, low blood sugar, in unconscious or unresponsive diabetic patients. So that's what they gave him. I've seen them do that to him once before, or I couldn't even get him to open his eyes. And I'm telling you, it was like that scene in Pulp Fiction. They gave him that, and he was like wide awake instantly. That didn't happen this time, and that scared me. And they said, no, it can take a little longer. And I was like, I hope so. So then he started he was able to talk a little bit, and he knew my name. So, they asked him a few questions, and that was good. So they said, though, we do have to take him. And I said, yes, please do. Just did a little bit more editing. I'm doing this in bite-sized pieces. So they took him. I went to see him. I ended up spending the entire night at the ER with him because I had taken some Benadryl just before this happened. And then by the time I got to the hospital, the Benadryl was kicking in, and I was so groggy. So I think they let us go around 7 or 7:30 in the morning. And it was long for him, but long for me because there was nothing. I would have laid down on the ER bed with him, but there wasn't like really enough room. It wasn't like a hospital bed. So I just had a chair, no reclining chairs or anything. They need something more comfortable in the ER because a lot of people stay until they know what's going to happen to their person, right? And I was like putting a pillow on his bed and just trying to, lay my head. I was like, I'm going to be so sore tomorrow. Everything hurt. The next day, I think the most comfortable I got was just putting the pillow on the bed in front of me and putting the chair like right against his bed and then putting my head down on the pillow like a school desk. And we left. And then, the week was uneventful. Then toward the end of the week, and I'm just going to touch on this because I might bring it back up a little later, started to get moody, like I'd say Thursday and Friday and then Saturday. And I'll talk about that more because I want you guys to know that if you're with somebody who's bipolar or who has, diabetes can cause the mood swings too, all that stuff. Yes, it's wonderful if you can understand and not take it personally, but there comes a time that you do have to make a decision for yourself. Can I really do this? Because it's a lot of work, especially if you're taking care of someone physically, helping them and, giving them their meds and checking their blood sugar or whatever you might have, a person that needs other kinds of physical help. That's great if you're in a good mental place, but then when bipolar kicks in, all the understanding in the world doesn't mean you're not going to be like, I can't fucking take this anymore. That's where we were. That's where I was with him at the end of the week. Now, I'm starting to shift a little bit because I do have to remember that there are things, but I didn't, I don't say every time something goes wrong, oh, well, it's because of his bipolar. Sometimes I want to just think people are assholes, right? But you do have to remember, see, I think everybody who has mood swings or rage, I'm the rage person. I can be happy as can be, and then something can happen, especially if I'm startled or just something can happen and I can see fucking red and just be in a rage, and it ruins whatever is going on for me that day, sometimes the next day. And those two things don't always mix. I knew this was going to be a very choppy video with a lot of editing. I left off saying, Joe has his stuff, his bipolar and this and that. I have my other stuff. Mine, it's really a lot like post-traumatic stress. It's, anyway, I don't want to get into all of that. I'm just letting you know that I am watching out for myself, because I know some of you worry, you think, oh, you're going to just, be taking care of somebody and this. I don't mind taking care of people as long as I'm not going to be driven into the ground. And I'm 65 now. I don't think I can handle anywhere near what I handled with my mother for 20 years of just taking care of her. And I'm not going to be able to do that. And Joe and I talk about it. I said, there's going to be a time that I'm not going to be able to handle you. I mean, it's just a lot. I don't want to be doing all of that. I'll cook for him. He has been able to cook for himself. He certainly does frozen foods, things like that. So it's not like I'm doing everything. But it's, a lot of work just to take care of things like, oh, I have to check his blood sugar. Oh, I have to. And then I worry when I go to bed. What am I, going to wake up with in the middle of the night? Am I going to be calling an ambulance? Are we going to the hospital? I had to edit again. I was saying that, Joe has his things. I have my things. If I'm good, things can go good. But when I am not good, nothing's going to go good, because a lot of things for Joe isn't going good, because he has so many things. So it really kind of falls on me to try to keep things going good. And I can't do it all the time. It's the mental part that I don't like. And I will not be able to do a lot of physical stuff. I don't want to be doing all physical stuff. We talk about it. I talk about, like, we're going to have to see at least what options are if you, get to the point where I really can't be doing it all for you. And because, most likely it's going to go that way. So I just don't want people to think that I'm a pushover and that I'm just going to do everything. No, I'm taking care of myself too, because I am stressed about a lot of just life things, and I can't have, a whole lot of physical stress. Won't be able to do that like I did for my mother. I just can't. And it's sad, but, you know, I'll do what I can. Let's just put it that way. I'm not going to overdo. I had to edit again. Phone rang. I'll tell you about that in a second here. I want to wrap this up. One of the big hurdles is just the things you have to be willing to do to adapt to being with someone who is bipolar, and also being with someone who has her own trauma. And it's okay if both of us are in a good place, and it's like miserable if we're not. And we just went through a little rough patch where I thought, this has got to end, but you know, and then he's sick, and it's like, oh. And I can tend to forget that those things are real, bipolar and stuff. And again, it's hard if you're just tired too. But here's now what I thought of, because once he was in the hospital, he's just back to sweet Joe. See, with his bipolar, he thinks that anytime I say something, I'm saying, I want you out of here. And I don't do that. And in fact, it's the opposite. I say, I don't care if we ever decide we don't want to be a couple. You are more than welcome to live here. And if I have another boyfriend and he can't put up with that, well, tough shit. You're my roommate, and, you know, you come first. So, you know, I talk to him about things like that. And he always said, no, I would never stay. I would never be able to stay. Now he understands that he really has to have a place to live. So we are discussing those things. And I think the fact that we know we need some space, some mental space, I think that might help us. We are going to try to go back into therapy. We were in couples therapy. She specialized in addiction behaviors and trauma and things like that. That was good. And also with, you know, mental illnesses. I don't know if bipolar is considered that. I don't know enough. Mood swings, things like that. She understands all those kind of things. But I couldn't get him to talk. She just couldn't get him to talk. So it wasn't a good fit for him. Then he lost his insurance. And now we're going to see about starting back up. And, you know, we're going to try to get a good fit, because I have to be reminded that he is bipolar, and he needs to be reminded that I'm a woman. There's no cure for that. And so now we just got to get him better. So they put him in the ICU. He's considered serious. He looked like shit today. I stayed with him for a while, and he mostly just slept, and that I was glad. But he, you know, he looks very weak. He hadn't eaten anything yet at all when I went there. And, oh, but get this. So maybe I'll just save that. I'll save that for the other video. No, I'll just tell you, because, again, it's things that bother me. When I finally talked to his nurse last night, it was a man nurse, he was asking about meds and stuff, and Joe's the one who remembered. He's like, what's the other one that I can't take? And I had my meds list, and the nurse didn't care to see it. And he said, you know, the one that when I came out of treatment, they told me not to take that because it made my sugar go really high. I said, oh yeah, Seroquel. And so I told the guy, I said he's not to take Seroquel because it affects his sugar. And he's in the hospital for sugar too high, right? DKA, high sugar, can't regulate it. I said, it's really important. I said, I don't know if I would consider it an allergy or just bad reactions. I said, but he can't have that. And he said, okay. Today I'm there, and the nurse comes in, and she asked me, no. Well, she said something about meds, and it made me remember, I want to ask her, is he getting any of his bipolar meds? And she said, we're giving him his Cymbalta, but they didn't have the other one. And she said, I don't even really know. I said, well, I have the list. Do you want the list? Her too? No. So I said, okay. She said, no. She said, he won't need that one because the doctor is prescribing Seroquel for him. And I said, Seroquel? I said, that should be right there somewhere that he can't take that. I said, I told the nurse last night. She's like, oh, you did? And I said, yes. I said, he supposed to have been putting it. So she says, I don't see this anywhere. See, And she goes, well, what does Seroquel do to him? And I said, it makes his sugar go up. And she said, oh, then he can't take that. I said, no, he can't. And I said, how is it that that didn't get put in there? I said, if you and I wouldn't have talked about it, he'd be getting Seroquel tonight, and they wouldn't know it was that. I mean, you know, if his sugar was going up again, it makes me so sick and so sad to know that he would have had Seroquel tonight. So she said, well, what is his bipolar med? It's Vraylar. I don't know how come I never say it out loud, but it's Vraylar. And I said, it's Vraylar. And she says, and what dose? And I said, I got my paper right here. Now, at this point, I'm seeing that red rage a little bit. And I can be like, what the fuck? You know, I can lose it. I can lose it. But I'm trying really hard to not lose it like I could and did many times in the past. Especially if I was hungover. I pull out my paper and I told her the dose. And she comes over like behind me and looks at the paper and she goes, oh my God, you have right there no Seroquel. And I said, yeah, because it's important that he doesn't get it, you know. So I'm not sure. Okay, so hopefully we saved him from that. Hopefully he will not get that. Oh, I'm so scared. Anyway, Joe called and said that he's had a cough. He's had a cough for a while, and we talked about it when we saw his primary care like almost a month ago. And she said it could be his blood pressure med. That one can kind of cause a dry cough. I should have said I would like him to have chest x-rays, you know, but didn't. She changed his blood pressure med. Now Joe tells me that they were concerned about his lungs, how his lungs sound. So they did a chest x-ray and he has pneumonia. And they did an MRI, and I don't know why they did that. So that worries me. They're looking for stuff. So DKA can be fixed for the moment, but every time he goes through that, and he has gone through this many times, each time, you know, it breaks you down a little bit each time. And especially as he's older, and, you know, it can eventually shut down your organs. Like if they would not be able to get him out of it this time, in a couple days or whatever, his organs would start to be affected. So hopefully we can get him out of that and just try to do better. And so I looked, I looked up. I was curious. Let me get this other thing that I looked up. I was curious to know if DKA can start a couple days before we see the symptoms. I thought not, because it's, to me, I understand it's something that is quick. But I thought maybe he started to get like that Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We just weren't getting along. And because of just his, you know, it's hard to explain. I will talk about that another time. Again, it's just, you know, mental stuff and drives me crazy. But no, I looked it up and it says no. DKA is very rapid. As soon as you're in DKA, you're going to know it. You're going to be throwing up. You're going to be very sick. You're going to, you know, your sugar's high. It's quick. Then I looked up, and I know stress does a lot for a diabetic. It can change their sugar. Can stress cause DKA? So this is what, where is it? Hang on. Let me try to find that again. I asked, can stress cause DKA in a diabetic? And it says, yes. Stress can trigger diabetic ketoacidosis, DKA, in individuals with diabetes, especially type 1. That's Joe. Because it causes the body to release stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, which interfere with insulin's ability to move glucose into cells for energy. Without enough insulin, the body breaks down the fat for fuel, producing ketones and leading to DKA. And one of the things they told him is that, this is the serious part. I mean, obviously DKA is ketoacidosis. There's the word acid in there. But from what I learned today, the ketones, if they can't be processed or whatever, I just, pretend I know what I'm talking about. They turn into acid. That's the bad part. You don't want the acid, from what I understand. And the doctor said he has like way too many ketones, not processing them. They're all turning into acid. So that's the serious part. But it was sounding like it was extremely high for Joe. Okay? So that's where we stand. So now it could be that he was having bipolar episode those few days, which changed his mood and made him grumpy. It's more like grumpy than angry, but then grumpy, and then if I say something, he'll turn around somehow and put it on me. This is when I had said back, like for last summer, I thought he could be a narcissist because he does things that my mother would do. But I knew he had a lot of empathy. It didn't make sense to me. So now I really think it's the bipolar, that they're very defensive, very, very quick to think their partner is cheating. It can be like all good, and then all of a sudden, who are you with? And just like I can go to the store and like, what are you doing? How come you're not home yet? And who are you with? Are you with somebody? Are you meeting somebody? It's like, Joe, that's the part that I can't put up with. Those kinds of things. And it's a big thing for bipolar, at least men. I watch women who talk about their bipolar partners. So it's across the board stuff like that. And it gets to the point, like I said, if I'm stressed out, I don't want to hear any of that. If I'm not stressed, I can say, nicely, no, of course not. And I can change the subject, even if we're just texting, like, what did you say the other day that Rocket needed or something? If I can change the subject. So it's a lot, but when I'm not, mentally with it too, or I'm just tired and worried and stressed about all kinds of things. It doesn't have to be stressed about Joe. It could be anything, all the bullshit, car, stuff like that. It's hard for us to, neither one of us can support the other because we're both mental at the moment. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, so I'm looking at this past few days. I believe it's bipolar. Bipolar caused or had something to do with causing this DKA, because he was very, very stressed, and he would be, I don't know. It's just hard to explain. Oh, I don't wish it on anybody, but I know there's a lot of people out there going through this stuff, and you have no clue that there's names for these things. And that it does help to get educated. It really does, for the most part. All right, I'm going to have another story for you coming up. And I'm going to wait and see about his MRI results. I don't think I'll see the doctor in the morning because I'm not going to be there early. But I'm hoping I can talk to the nurse or maybe talk to the doctor at some point. Find out what's going on with all that. I hope he's feeling better tomorrow. Certainly going to call him tonight, and he knows he can call me, all night. It doesn't matter. I'll be there to talk to him. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back with more soon. Bye.